Hi, everybody. I've been playing around with ChatGPT recently. I'm sure you've seen some things out there. But I wanted to show you something that maybe you can consider using, um, something to help you kind of think through things. But ChatGPT can write outlines for you. And so what I did was I threw together a statement to give it some direction. You need to be very, very specific when you write these things. But I thought, what the hey, let me just see what it does. So I'm asking ChatGPT, which is an AI that will write these things for you. Something new, you've probably heard about it. I'm asking it to write an outline for the literature review of chapter 2 with the purpose of, and then I kind of summarized my purpose statement, determining if and to what extent there are differences in work engagement for instructional designers working predominantly at home versus those who work predominantly in the office, and what the moderating effect of psychological capital has on that relationship. Lots of words. I'm going to give it to the AI and see what it comes up with. I thought it would be interesting to see what it does, and you can kind of see it might give you some ideas, some things to think about, but you'll see it lays it out in themes. And I'll give you some of my perspective on what it's providing. That's kind of interesting here. It's giving me all kinds of stuff. So I didn't order it this way, but I think it's really interesting. So let me scroll back up. Okay, it starts with an introduction. You're going to do this in chapter 2 with your review of literature. What's the purpose of the literature review? You'll have already talked about your research question and objectives. You'll do a brief introduction of the key concepts or the themes: work engagement, instructional designers, remote work, and psychological capital. So those were essentially what I had. I did virtual work, so maybe it just kind of assumed remote work from what I wrote. And I actually started with instructional designers as my first theme. So, this is just kind of what it thinks about. So in work engagement, talks about definition of work engagement and it's important in organizations. Makes total sense. I would include that. Theoretical frameworks. This is included in a different part of your chapter 2. It's not included in the literature review, so you could skip that. Factors that influence work engagement. Yeah, I would totally write about that because you will have read that in articles. Prior studies examining work engagement in remote work settings. Yeah, I would cover that. What's missing here is like outcomes of work engagement, organizational benefits, antecedents to work engagement. There's a little bit more that you could put in here, but it's a good start. And it gives me things to start thinking about as I'm writing about work engagement. So if you think about you're defining it, you're talking about factors that influence it, existing studies on work engagement and remote work, maybe some outcomes, existing studies. You could easily write 5 or 6 pages on work engagement just with those general ideas. Then it goes into remote work and instructional designers. I would actually separate those into 2 different themes. Definition of work remote and its prevalence in the workplace. Yep. Impact of work remote work. Yep. Totally covered that. Advantages and disadvantages of remote work. I would cover that, and then I would talk about specifically if there's any research on advantages or disadvantages for instructional designers. In my study, we actually talked about instructional designers as knowledge workers. So people that generate knowledge and information and content, that's what a knowledge worker is, which is what instructional designers are. They're not producing products or making things that are physically tangible. So they're considered knowledge workers, and there's a lot of research out there on remote work for knowledge workers. And then you can see it's kind of starting to tie things together, right? Work engagement, instructional designers working remotely. Then it talks about psychological capital. So we define it. Theoretical frameworks, again, that's in an earlier part of chapter 2. Impact of psychological capital on employee engagement and performance. Previous studies on the relationship between psychological capital and work engagement. They've added remote work engagement there. As of like 2021, there were no studies that were looking at all 3 of those together. And then it talks about differences in work engagement. So it's looking at remote versus office-based. So what existing research is out there that's interesting. I included that in my work engagement theme. So, but it's given me some ideas on what I could include. And then it's got a theme on the moderating effect of psychological capital. So, what studies are out there? I think there were 3 or 4 for mine. What's the potential moderating effect? What could happen? And possible explanations for it. Oh, interesting. I did not include that. And then you summarize your findings, implications, limitations of previous studies and areas for future research. That's really more for chapter 5. The one thing that's not in here, well, they don't really call it out, but in each of these themes, you would talk about like qualitative versus quantitative studies, or studies, if you're quantitative, studies that use the instruments that you're thinking about. If you're qualitative, you could talk about, studies that conducted focus groups, whereas your study is going to focus on interviews to get a more deeper level of understanding, those kinds of things. I just wanted to show you guys ChatGPT. Clearly, it's AI. Clearly, the first draft is not going to be perfect. But if you're kind of stumped and you just want some thought provokers, maybe go in and play around with it and just, throw in some things, write an outline, ask it to do, here, let's see, create an outline describing work engagement and related research. Let's just see what it comes up with. So it's going to generate at the bottom here. So here's even more ideas. Well, it's repeating some of the things. Personal factors. Oh, interesting. When work-related factors. Organizational factors. Okay, so this can give you some ideas of things to put into your outlines. Ooh, differences in work engagement across groups, so demographics. So you can, I love this. This is not supposed to do the work for you. Why I'm showing it to you is because I think it's a really great tool to get you thinking about things and to consider things that you might not have thought about before. And also, because you've done all this research and reading on your articles, when it lists things like work-related factors, it might click in your head, oh, I've read 3 or 4 different articles that talk about that. And that's a paragraph or 2 that you can add to your literature review. So just wanted to show this to you, show you that there's some tools out there that can help you with thinking. This is not a tool that you can use to write your dissertation, but use it sparingly, carefully, and use it to help you step out of any writer's block or psychological barriers that we create for ourselves by overthinking or getting frustrated. Hopefully this will be helpful for you. If anything, it was really interesting and fun to take a look at. Have a great weekend, and I will see you soon.